Hey there! Welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And now it's time for year-end list. Let's start with what will inevitably be the biggest, the top 10 worst hit songs of 2025. Throughout the 2020s, I've pointed to a specific emotion that described my overarching feelings towards the worst hits in any given year. Disgust, embarrassment, shock, rage. I didn't formally pick a word or put a name to the feeling in 2024, but if I did, it'd probably be foreboding or dread. Whereas much as everyone was ready to canonize that year as having some of the most monumentous music of the century so far, I couldn't help but look beneath the surface and see a lot less quality than what was getting propped up, the rot that was being concealed by a lot of the buzz. And thus 2025, I think the word I'm going for is catharsis, maybe even vindication. Because man alive, talking about a drop-off in quality that aligned with all of my worst fears, the Hot 100 of 2025 goddamn sucked. And it's to the point where I'm honestly struggling to find the best comparison to 2025. The best I can come up with is a blend between 2014 and maybe 2018. The former for the uncertain transitional state of every genre, where the Hot 100 settled into stagnant mush for too much of the year, coasting on the coattails of a more interesting year, and the latter for the best song's lack of quality utterly overtaking the strength of the best of that year, made even worse by the pop stars you thought could do so much better playing down to the competition, and the acts that were truly bad somehow only seeming to get worse. We'll get to the shortage of quality in our next list. It's more than a little bit alarming how much the wealth of awful here feels more prominent than the best of the best this year. But if I'm running through genres just to highlight problems, well, pop music saw one of the worst drop-offs in quality I have seen in recent memory, although I would argue most of it was foretold by the worst trends that started last year and got ignored. Mainstream hip-hop struggled mightily outside of a couple of artists. Drake may have actually had a point in saying that the mainstream could not survive without him, which makes things all the more ironic because much of what he released this year was even worse, and country continued its downward skid from 2024, where the Morgan Wallen of it all certainly did not help. Even international scenes struggled. I remain generally indifferent on K-pop Demon Hunters. It's not going to make either of my year-end list. But if you look at K-pop outside of that, the genre didn't exactly have a strong 2025, especially in America. Shift over to Latin music and you run into similar problems. I was lukewarm on Bad Bunny's new album in comparison with so many other critics, but the songs that I really liked from that album barely charted. And if you look elsewhere in the scene, it gets rough and fast. The only genre I would argue did comparably well in 2025 in the mainstream, R&B, and even then there were notable duds pulling back an otherwise strong year there. So in fact, let's start there.
Remember used to drive a Yukon. I pick up whenever you call. In the parking lot in Tucson, like, are you with me? In the Phantom with the roof gone. I pull up like Jimmy Neutron. I can help you get a move on, like you haul, and I know.
I watched so many R&B fans fall over themselves praising this, and the more disbelieving listens I gave it, the more depressed I got. I see what you're doing here, Dijon. That's the way to hide Justin Bieber's utter lack of a personality, is smother him behind a pitch-shifted filter and instrumental pickups that sound like they're dipped in butter. The fundamental issue of this song is that it's trying really hard to present Bieber as the coolest, flyest dude in the room. So naturally, the first verse you get lines like, I pull up like Jimmy Neutron, and I can help you get a move on like U-Haul, where he's asking for the password to approach more, but is trying to play more laid back because he knows he's going to make her beg for it, alongside the most disinterested 2 Chainz ad-libs I have heard in years. Yeah, that's what the ladies want. An underpowered Justin Timberlake impression in 2025, where the nice things you bring are references to cartoons from 20 years ago, and an excess of cardboard for all of your shipping needs. This is a song that desperately needs someone with a pulse and warmth and charisma who can deliver these bad lines with a small but winning smile. Not a member of Alvin and the Chipmunks who wanted to be the reincarnation of John Mayer. I know 2000s nostalgia has been a thing the past couple of years, but man, even from Justin Bieber, there was better.
But it's actually sweet. All the time you've spent on me, it's honestly wild. All the effort you've put in, it's actually romantic. I really gotta hand it to you. No man has ever loved me like you do.
So I think the bones of this song are already picked pretty clean. It sucks, the guitar sounds like ass, and it's a diss track towards Charlie XCX drenched in way too much mean girl sapphic language, so you best believe that it pissed off all the Gaylors. And the more listens I gave it, the more that felt kind of intentional in a really ugly way, especially given that Taylor Swift writes about sex with the aptitude of the wine moms that she dissed on her last album, but who probably read or write better erotica than this. I know that you hate chunks of your own fandom, Taylor, but you've expressed that sentiment way better. I am grateful that Charlie XCX basically ignored this, mostly because Sympathy is a Knife wasn't really a diss at Taylor, but it also was in the same way that First Person Shooter by Drake and J. Cole shot at Kendrick Lamar, more between the lines with a vestige of plausible deniability. But that then prompted a hip-hop comparison to an act who floods the market with very little quality control, and who could also get flagrant and out of pocket for no good reason, where the muddy love-hate relationship feels like a jab for attention, even if some of your complaints are more justified than anyone should otherwise admit. So congrats, Taylor Swift, you've made the modern version of a diss track by The Game. If Kendrick is still answering the phone, call and ask him to explain it to you.
I'm a red letter rebel, but some become the devil when the moon is full. Yeah, the only thing keeping these tracks on the train. Knowing I'm a little crazy, but the world's insane.
Morgan Wallen charted a lot of bad songs this year, and make no mistake, there's going to be a lot more of them on this list. But the reasons that this wound up here, it's linked to things that you might miss if you just pluck this song to fill out a playlist of your favorites rather than listen to the album in its entirety. In other words, like 95% of Morgan Wallen's fan base. Because on the surface, it's a spare, largely major key, Aaron Lewin-esque bit of right-wing paranoia, where the guy in question is a red-letter rebel, meaning that he's a bad dude who nevertheless reads the Bible and goes to church regularly, but will transform into a devil at the full moon. That's called a werewolf, Morgan Wallen, you can say that. Where he keeps the gun by the bed and is hopped up on painkillers and booze as he shouts at his TV set, so much so that the kids are actually scared to approach his house on the hill. I mean, I barely even had to check that Hardy co-wrote this. It's full of the same posturing of being a dangerous dude on the edge who still runs illegal moonshine in 2025, you know, somewhere around when he ran out of SNL for that publicity stunt. But he has to be like this because the world's insane. And it's very telling he mentions child abduction in a verse, because this is the exact sort of person who buys every bit of conspiratorial moral majority fear-mongering, but will never question when their guy is in power or plainly implicated, or do any sort of deeper self-reflection about how none of his shit is helping. And now I remind you that this is how Morgan Wallen ended his album, pointing a finger at the world and the audience, a full-throated admission that, yeah, he's a problem, but can't/won't do anything about it. This is machismo with its guts ripped out. And you know, while we're here,
Better not give him my nickname. I don't like thinking about it. I swear that it's wearing me down. No, but tell me, who's getting all of mine? Who's getting all of mine? Residuals.
You know, just because 2025 was a really good year for R&B doesn't mean that Chris Brown has to be graduated into that class. He had multiple songs that charted this year for some god-awful reason, this being a leftover from April 2024, and truthfully, it's not the production that really bothered me. The gauzy synth warbles with that slight smolder of electric guitar revving behind the drums is actually pretty decent. But this is where we're stuck with Chris Brown's whinging egotism, and that this really soured on me. Basically, the song is rooted in the frustrated annoyance that the girl left him behind because he's emotionally unstable. I believe you, Chris Brown. Also appreciative of you yourself mentioning it in the first verse, but also she clearly wanted out. Again, for good reason. He tried to play that it was mutual, but he did so much to build this girl up that he's now wondering who is getting his residuals. So not only does the song feel way more focused on the dude who is now getting this girl that he's calling residual, which feels apropos for a lot of manosphere conversations, where they are way more obsessed with what other guys think and what other guys want in the actual woman in question. But that term has me wondering, is it just kind of disgusting to refer to a woman as residual, which sounds like you didn't clean up after sex, or is it hilarious stupid in a heart full of equity, you're an asset sort of way? That's a good question. The answer is yes.
Is it Stacy? Is it Becky? Is it Keisha? Is it LP? Was it Dante? Is it Marty? Where's the function?
Where the fuck the function? Where the fuck the function?
I have seen way too many people give this a pass because Drake proved that he could make a dance song for the girls again in 2025, and it was a hit. That got conspicuously blocked from the #1, because when you can't rig the system in your favor, it's been rigged from the jump, right, Drake? What's genuinely funny is that it actually performed worse in Canada, so much for a lot of rebuilding your cultural cachet at home, because that certainly didn't happen. But while it's not the worst from that album, while Meet Your Padre exists, this song still blows. The chintzy, watery bleep behind all the chipmunk vocals that sounds like the gurgling afterbirth of the late 2000s. You lived through this era. Your debut came out in this era. You know exactly how bad the production was for you on Thank Me Later, with Elcan providing the hook and muling baby girl as Drake tries to come on to this girl by mentioning that he and his crew are all inside this club with illegal guns, and he wants to be alone with her even as she wants to leave. That's not scary. And even then, he runs through the list of girls that he could be calling on him anyway, which feels like a transparently desperate guilt trip, before the song just collapses into Memphis-inspired curdled goop, where Drake brags about the drinks, jokes, sex, and cash he can provide in the most goofy 80s rap throwback cadence imaginable. Might be why he thinks the corniness "I'ma at you like bless me" or the truly misplaced Gretzky reference work in 2025. In a year where Canada was kinda at odds with the United States, you couldn't have picked a more modern, Toronto-centric hockey reference. I know the Maple Leafs are infuriating underachievers, but at least if you could have gone there, well, it might have been too real. Never mind.
You better tell, I treat you well, I will. It's good, I can tell. Come give me hell, come here. Your fairy tale, under your spell, I am. She gets Chanel, oh well.
So Chris Brown's next project is semi-self-titled, aka it is called Brown. That's probably a mistake when you keep shoveling out shit. And there's so much about this I despise. The limp trap drill production smothered in auto-tune and riding that watery flip of Usher's Nice and Slow, a much better song that seems constantly about to give out. That throwaway Bryson Tiller verse where this girl, she is apparently cheating on her man with him, but Bryson Tiller doesn't want to be loved out of spite. Turning down the revenge sex. I didn't know you were such a romantic here, Tiller. And the fact that this is anchored on a, well, it all depends attitude to this hookup, which is this air of capriciousness that quite frankly neither man can remotely back up. But it is Chris Brown who is ultimately the biggest welt on this song. Dude, I know it's been over 15 years since that incident, you know which one. Some of us don't exactly forget whenever you bring up rough sex, or you self-admit that this girl calls him toxic, but he claims that he's under her spell, saying that she's not #1 in his top 10 as he tries to frame it as romantic, but not being anonymous about it, accepting monogamy by taking the condom off. I should also mention the Usher remix, which kept the song charting long enough to make this list but wasn't credited. I don't know why Chris Brown continues to invite Usher onto his songs, because not only does Usher wash him every single time, Chris Brown appears to keep trying to fight Usher afterwards. Yes, that's what happened when the Coke's got you brave. And you know, while we're on that territory,
I'll be your father figure. I drink that brown liquor. I can make deals with the devil because my dick's bigger. This love is pure profit. Just step into my office. I dry your tears with my sleeve. Leave it with me.
you know, when I reviewed Midnights in the Tortured Poets department, and Taylor Swift kept talking about in interviews how much she liked the TV show Succession, I had the hope that she seemed to grasp some of the more challenging, emotional, and thematic elements of that show, especially given how often she talked about certain characters. And thus, it really, really stings that when she finally made her Succession-inspired song, it's modeled after the corpulent, nakedly abusive, and lecherous Logan Roy, badly flipping the George Michael sample of this song into this creaky, sickly mess where Swift's breathy, cooing delivery doesn't remotely match, well, any of the big dick flexing that she's writing, with all the same awkward, overwritten preening as the man, but then embracing that power structure wholeheartedly this time around with even less subtext. And yeah, I know, I've seen the discourse that this song is actually an extended sub at Scott Borchetta, the Big Machine executive that brought her into country music at the very beginning and then sold her masters to Scooter Braun when he couldn't control her, that this song changes perspective from his to hers, where she brings in a bunch of mafioso imagery for the final hook. That interpretation doesn't piss me off as much, but not getting Succession might be more charitable to her. If it's about more industry bullshit, it makes Swift look considerably worse. You already got all your masters back. Your re-recording spawned the Eras Tour. Your last record on Big Machine was 8 years ago. This is a score in music you settled over the course of multiple albums. Are you still this petty? But what's most revealing is how impressed she was by that mahogany grain line, that so many of her own people were so in awe of it. Taylor Swift, fire those people. They are yes men. They ultimately don't want what's best for you. Otherwise,
I am surrounded by snakes and fucking morons! You're a bunch of silk-stocking fucks!
so yeah, that's our dishonorable mentions. I'm a little shocked how easy all of that was to write. Must be a sign that 2025's worst gave me way more material. Speaking of which, number 10. I know I'm not going to make any fans by including the song. I get why folks like it. I get why it's a fan favorite. I also get that it's operating on multiple levels of irony and self-awareness. I also know that at the end of the day, this was the song where any grace I had for Sabrina Carpenter ran out.
Here we go again, crying in bed. What a familiar feeling. All my friends in love, and I'm the one they call for a third wheel. Probably should have guessed he's like the rest, so fun and so deceiving. There's nobody's son, not anyone left for me to believe in.
In 2024, fellow music commentator Blake Jennings highlighted that Sabrina Carpenter made the album for hot girls that date down for sport was short and sweet. And man's best friend felt like watching that person see the world kind of grow up around her while she tries to hold on to control with increasing desperation. And if this was just about Sabrina Carpenter's exasperation at critics who don't like that she has sex when they all do, as she said in an interview, that would be one thing. But Nobody's Son is the moment where the guy realizes that none of this is working. He's actually being actively mistreated in this relationship. He tries to go work on himself, leaving Sabrina Carpenter behind and not calling back, and this is her tantrum in response. Now note that this being a tantrum doesn't have to be a bad thing in pop music. You can thrive in melodrama and immaturity. Songs like Pink's So What or Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo absolutely own this. But not only does Jack Antonoff's production sound like the goopy runoff of Please Please Please, with the cheap vocal master and the drippy synth and the drum stutter, Sabrina Carpenter's brand of it feels so insulated yet vindictive that I can't remotely sympathize. Oh no, you have to be the third wheel on a date for once, which scandalizes you to the point where you're dissing the guy's mom for not raising him right, for being corrupt and giving you PTSD even as a whip crack sounds in the background. Where if you heard Man's Best Friend, you know exactly that Sabrina Carpenter is convinced that she should be the one cracking said whip. And it's in that larger context that I just find gross, because Carpenter is enough of a showgirl to coax all this through a lot of irony and self-awareness and humor to cushion the blow. But she still believes what she's selling. It's the through line, it's the constant prim disavowal of how toxic it actually is, which neuters any actual power it could have for the shallow, Californicated glop. In the same territory as break up with your girlfriend, I'm bored. I do think that a lot of the sex negative controversy that Sabrina Carpenter faced this year was bullshit. The larger issue is that Man's Best Friend was mediocre at best. This is the worst example as to why. Number 9. So while we're on the topic of folks for whom I ran out of patience with this year,
I'd rather lie than to lose you, girl. I'd rather lie than confuse you, girl. Truth is we left them, they want us gone. Truth is they can't handle me at the top. I'd rather spare you the details, my love.
well, for as much patience as I had, there was a lot of hype for Playboi Carti's music this year. It wound up on a lot of year-end lists, especially for mainstream hip-hop, and it feels more driven off of not wanting to miss out on the hype than any sort of evidence of quality. But Carti's greatest strength has always been driving for that moment, making it feel bigger than it is, an inevitable magnetic spray of braying obnoxiousness running way more on energy than substance. That might actually work in a live setting, but for me it's always felt high risk. Even the fans were starting to lose patience with the delays and all the nonsense around this rollout, especially if there was any shot that could utilize a big name feature for mainstream crossover, like say a hook from The Weeknd, where he'd rather lie than lose this person amidst flexing being on top. The foundation of any trust here, as the weedy synth shudder as the stock trap percussion comes through and Carti does his weak Young Thug by way of Lil Uzi Vert impression, it's shaky, then flexing about a troubled relationship where he tries to buy and bullshit his way out of it, only for the second verse to reveal all that nascent and incoherent ugliness of that scene, that he took this girl from someone else and it never quite worked out, so he's so high off of lean and molly that he's gonna crash out rather than admit any sort of truth that he did anything wrong. And this is where I remember the violent mess that Playboi Carti has been throughout multiple relationships. I'm supposed to be sympathetic for his faux grandiose struggle here, where he can't reveal the truth? What truth? That you're an asshole? I think that might be implied. But if you think that this description feels more incoherent than usual, well, this is where I reveal that much of Playboi Carti's vocals on this song aren't his at all. There's supposedly an AI filter applied to one of his co-writers to sound more like Playboi Carti. That raises the obvious question of where else AI might have been used in this process, but it also leads me to two more revealing issues. The first being that Playboi Carti's scattershot blur of stock tropes and catchphrases and ad-libs has the hallucinatory style of a large language model. Seriously, You needed co-writers for this? But the second observation is that if your fundamental appeal is based on your electric performance, and your co-writers can replicate that with a filter, how much idiosyncratic punk edge is just smoke and mirrors here for an artist who has been losing his sauce for years now? The harsh truth is ultimately always better in the long run than this lie. And my truth that this is miserable, sanctimonious dreck. Next. Number 8. So I've talked with some friends for months now how someone like Drake could potentially make a proper comeback after what happened with Kendrick Lamar. Not just remain popular, but disgraced. Actually dig himself out of the hole. And I always circle back to maturity, trying to reground yourself in culture, finding the older hip-hop icons that inspired him, refocusing on wordplay in the rap or stronger singing in R&B, hopefully squashing some old beefs across Canada to build up your local ties, setting things right, showing accountability, maybe they'll let you come back stronger. I mean, the last thing you would want to do is go back to badly imitating other cultures and accents and sounds that show that you've learned nothing.
All the girls that's here for the truth, come put both hands on a DJ booth, then wind your waist to the big man sound, and I get too stiff cause the thing's too round. Good God, make me lift up your gown, but your face so sweet, wanna spin you around. If I go link gang, I'll bring you around. If I go to the bar, I'll bring you around.
This was barely a hit. I know that even in my extended list, this was at the very bottom. I know that some will question why I'm even bothering punching at this. But Drake, you're 40 next year. This is a part of your Iceman run. You thought this was a good choice. It isn't just mystifying, it's monumentally short-sighted. Let's skip quickly over Central C for, quite frankly, everyone's benefit. Hey, England, stop telling me this dude is worth caring about. For every line that seems cool, like that phoned-in 50 Cent reference, you get shit like, got a fairy ting and I got a witch one. And I'm now stuck between wondering if that was a bad Wicked reference or a Central C is way more fluid than I expected. Or a line, girl, your body is tea, it's pain, I'm sprung. T-Pain has so many better songs. Stop referencing one of his earliest and worst. And finally, your backside weighing you down 1 ton. I got a chopstick for your wonton. Gentlemen, I have to stress, it's not just about length, it's about girth. Comparing yourself to a chopstick does you no favors. But then you've got Drake with the forced patois and the leaden distorted fart of the bass that's clipping the mix for his third verse to flip over this passion fruit by way of work leftover. And so much of the song hinges on the question of which one do these girls potentially want? And I think some of them might be looking for the exit. They might be saying none of the above. Drake, if you think this is how the single should sound, you have way more difficult choices to make if you want your career to last much longer. All I'm saying. Number 7. On the flip side of songs that feel like they barely qualify, our next few absolutely do, and were effectively locks on this list as soon as the overplay kicked up in earnest. And here, I'm not gonna say last year I told you that this was gonna happen.
Boy, I'm mad, boy, I'm mad, boy, I'm mad at you. I had to get back at you. I had to get back at you.
The Jesse Murph experiment. What if we fused together Camila Cabello and BB Rexa with the dreadfully overwrought singing of the former and the sheer utter desperation to be famous of the latter, and then combine that with the taste of the most reckless and messy woman that you would ever meet at a southern dive bar? Well, it appears that experiment might have finally failed in 2025. Although I'm sure Columbia is going to desperately try and keep her career afloat for maybe a few more months, possibly a year, probably through a few more collaborations that will make everyone look worse alongside her, by the way. And truthfully, I've got a lot more I could have actually said about her or that album's sexist area. I actually had half a video essay written around her misbegottenness of an album, and a lot of the cross-cultural, multi-car pile-up of influences that would have deserved more attention if it wasn't well, terrible. But also I was in the process of moving and I had my bachelor party, and by the time I would have gotten it out, everyone seemed to forget she existed. But nobody's favorite pop star, she still managed to make Blue Strips a truly obnoxious radio hit. A post-breakup bender where for every time that she brays that she's not mad, but is trying to get back at this guy by throwing money at a strip club with her tits out and fucking her new man while smoking cigarettes on a balcony looking somewhat dangerous and plotting her next move. Yeah, totally, you're not mad, I buy that, that's believable. But it's that nasal squawk on the hook right at the very front of the mix with this dreary piano and late 2010s pop trap percussion that utterly sinks this for me. Congrats! You're trying to evoke nostalgia for one of the worst eras in mainstream pop in recent memory. A tuneless slog where they have to put your vocal line at the very front because nobody would remember anything else about this song otherwise. So yeah, sort of really bad radio fodder that is destined to be forgotten in record time until it gets lodged in your head like a persistent hangover migraine. I said last year we didn't have to keep Jesse Murph around. I think in 2025, everyone learned that lesson. Number 6. One of the biggest pop stars of 2025 was Tate McRae. If that's not a scathing indictment of this year, I don't know what is. And it's not even like she's the worst act going around in pop so much as I get this deep-seated feeling of dread when I read between the lines in a lot of her music and see how she is being marketed and managed. The same feeling that a lot of critics in the 2000s had watching Britney Spears, especially in the first half of that decade, knowing that something could well break in a really bad way. I guess that makes Kid Laroi her Kevin Federline. I immediately apologize to Kid Laroi for that comparison. If you know, you know. Now, to Tate McRae's credit, So Close to What, it's by far her best album, and I like Sports Car more than most. I'm not falling for the revolving door propaganda, it has never worked for me. But here's part of the comparison to Britney Spears that many of you would probably forget or not notice. Spears never went to the top of the Hot 100 that often. Not kidding. She had about a decade between Hit Me Baby One More Time and Womanizer, going to number 1 where nothing really got that high. Give Me More peaked at number 3, Toxic and Oops I Did It Again at number 9. Stronger, Lucky, Me Against the Music with Madonna, Break the Ice, even I'm a Slave for You never broke the top 10 despite her cultural dominance. And for Tate McRae, this was also kind of true. But this was the year she went to number 1. And it was with this.
She said, you don't want this heart, boy, it's already broke. Told me everything she touched just goes up in smoke. Only stay a couple nights, then she gon' be gone. I said, baby, you should know that's what I want. That's what I want, that's what I want.
My God, this is depressing. The sort of crossover pop country ballad that seems built for mass radio success, stuffed full of the cheap melodic hooks off the assembly line, and ironically took way too long to properly get that radio success because both country and pop were already playing more from both artists in question. Why bother with this dreary hookup song that seems more like a business arrangement than a showcase of any actual chemistry or talent? And you know, I remember the run-up that was teasing this song in the first half of this year, that Morgan Wallen was actually collaborating with a woman on his album. The fact you need a press junket for that reminds me of when video games then push out an advertisement that there is a playable female character. That's a goddamn low bar to reach, but also a whole bunch of mainstream country fans started hoping against hope that Morgan Wallen would actually pick someone in the genre, use his vast fame to elevate someone with legit pipes that he might even been linked to in the past. But no, he picked the least threatening, most pliant pop act imaginable, who has no problem playing opposite Morgan Wallen from the most grim hookup outside of, well, anyone sleeping with Chris Brown or Drake are on this list. So naturally, the only person who got any real backlash from this song was Tate McRae herself, who, okay, look, I knew she grew up in Calgary, she professed some fondness for country music, I actually kind of buy that. She probably thought that she could get away with this given changing cultural climate, which already feels like it's changed again in 2025. I've also long held the suspicion that she's not been well managed. The whole Kid Laroi fiasco speaks to that. And to me, this looked more like the chance to cross #1 hit off her list in terms of pop star ascendancy, rather than aligning with his politics. Now that might actually be worse. Privilege has a funny way of ignoring controversy in favor of getting the bag. It is the freedom to not think until precisely the moment the privilege runs out, but again, we'll have to see where everything falls out in the end. She might have more longevity. Till then, I mean, it's a cute little guitar rollick, but this sure isn't hell what I want. Number 5. So that might have been the worst thing that Tate McRae did this year. Please don't inform me if I've missed something. But with Morgan Wallen, the hole only goes deeper. If only this is where I could have said he hit rock bottom.
Yeah, it ain't nothing like where I'm from, no. Yeah, I can keep my gun in my truck and they don't know my name at these bars. And you can't even see any stars in.
Okay, non-country fans, you're gonna have to follow me on this one, because on the surface, the dislike seems obvious. The drippy sample with a cheap, glossy trap percussion that does not fit in country, the voice sample is chopped to ribbons, Morgan Wallen's verses swapped out with those from Lil Wayne and Rick Ross because, well, Rick Ross is from Miami and he's probably affordable, and Lil Wayne probably shares enough of the same politics as Morgan Wallen, and nothing from the Carter 6 was going to be a hit this year. We were all for the better there. And okay, let's be real, Rick Ross probably shares a lot of similar politics too. I've heard multiple albums of him flexing and yelling way too much about cocaine for way too damn long. Always very interesting how they tend to skirt around any sort of cultural blowback for working with Wallen here. But Rick Ross is the best part of this song for not remotely caring. Whereas Lil Wayne is bragging about this girl in Miami with a slew of ham-fisted hip-hop references, and bragging about throwing a yacht party despite not knowing how to swim, and getting iodine poisoning from eating too much shrimp. Because that's classy, being hunched over the toilet. And thank God they replaced Morgan Wallen's verses, which are just as sleazy in Miami, but feel jarringly incongruous coming from him, especially when he references Sand in My Boots, arguably one of his best ever songs that doesn't remotely deserve to be tainted near this. No. For me, it comes down to that sample of Miami, My Amy by the late Keith Whitley, a dated but genuinely charming slice of mid-80s country about a long-distance relationship between someone in LA and Miami. So naturally, what you do for an artist who died tragically and way too young of alcohol poisoning is chipmunk his voice and flip it into sleazy debauchery and machismo, where Morgan Wallen's dead-eyed hookups just have to be begging for him to stick around. Yeah, I'd call this his Miami Vice, but that entire franchise, including the Michael Mann movie and whatever the reboot's gonna be, is better than being associated with this. Number 4. Okay, there's a larger conversation about machismo that is worth exploring, certainly about a number of songs on this list. But just as interesting to untangle are the songs that are really attempting to showcase a performance of masculinity, but didn't fail disastrously. Sometimes they can lead to interesting music. Pay attention to my favorite hits of 2025 coming out soon, where Somber is going to show up multiple times, surprise, alongside a fair few other acts who also made this list. It was kind of a weird year, there's a lot of overlap. But sometimes, well again, can't say I didn't call it.
Once you know what my love's gonna feel like, nothing else will feel right. You can feel like moonbeam ice cream, taking off your blue jeans, dancing at the movies, 'cause it feels so mystical, magical, oh baby, 'cause once you know.
I'm starting to get really annoyed with Benson Boone using adjectives he cannot remotely back up. Beautiful Things did not live up to its title. Thank God Megan Maroney snatched that away this year and left that bleeding with a pulverized scrotum in the moonlight. And if this is either mystical or magical, someone should be calling the local exorcist or maybe a beholder, and get very nerdy, the latter of whom would only be slightly less uncanny than this album art, which my wife looked at and immediately spotted all of the Photoshop here. You're not fooling anyone, Benson Boone. And really, the experience of looking at Benson Boone like this dark parody of 80s action hero pinups while sounding like a Harry Styles impersonator, it kind of gives the game away, as the chintzy synths bounce off a credible bass line, and Benson Boone's trying to seduce this girl playing hard to get, into then him going straight into the showman Uncanny Valley by way of Dave Bailey of Glass Animals. Are you the great Gazoo trying magic to get this girl's blue jeans by proclaiming Moonbeam Ice Cream, which sounds sexual in a way that can only be disgusting? It's a cum shot line that's so catastrophically bad that Benson Boone initially tried to play into it, tried to make it a thing, but then he had to swerve to telling Jimmy Fallon that it was actually something that his co-writer came up with as a filler line because they couldn't think of anything else and they just went with it. This is what happens, kids, when a project is so obviously being rushed by your label that they didn't have time to think of something. Anything that could have been better. Now, I could also highlight that trying to wear down this girl's defenses over a million days would have you both long dead over 2,700 years later, or that this girl is very plainly not into him, so even if played for exaggeration, Benson Boone should get the goddamn hint. But it's the preening smugness paired with one of the worst lyrics of this year that had me immediately consigning this to among the worst. And yet, number 3. Here's a good rule. One thing you shouldn't do as a critic is say, I told you so. You might be right about a piece of art or an artist at the time or in the future. You can see exactly where it's all going, often way ahead of schedule, and you might even be completely right in the best or worst ways imaginable. But especially with art, I gotta be honest, you often need to wait people to discover it for themselves. It's not gonna happen any faster if you gloat about it, often you just piss everyone off. Now granted, I've already kind of done that once here already, and I'm really inclined to do it again. Man can indeed be lured by temptation.
Oh Lord, I need you now more than ever. Would you put my heart back together? I searched the world till my head hurt just to find out your ways better. Oh, oh, your ways better. Oh, oh, your ways better. Oh Lord, your ways better. Jesus, your ways better.
In 2025, we had multiple Christian contemporary artists cross to the Hot 100 and be successful. That's not counting acts who had pronounced Christian themes in their music that could also easily nail crossover. I'm not gonna say this is the equivalent of opening up the Hellmouth or unsealing the Seven Scrolls, but this rarely, if ever, happens in a good year for the Hot 100. And in this case, as the person who put Sunday Best by Surfaces at number 1 for the worst hit of 2020, boy is there some righteous vindication, and now seeing one of their members, one Forrest Frank, making a very similar brand of trap-infused pop, where of course it makes sense now why Sunday Best was the worst part of the Uncanny Valley. That might have actually been kind of a mistake on my part, ascribing it to that and that irony-poisoned nightmare fuel what might just be evangelical willful denial of reality and some level of idiocy. So Your Ways Better is actually considerably simpler in its arc. Forrest Frank went looking around the world for answers until his head hurt, like me listening to the song, then found God even when he was messy, everything you say making waves like a jet ski, and if you didn't recoil immediately from that line, I'm not sure I trust your critical faculties. What's worse here is that this doesn't remotely sound soulful or spiritual, even when they tack on the choirs that are borrowed from John Bellion. Forrest Frank produced this himself, so naturally it sounds like the cheapest sort of dated, overly staccato white pop trap with the piano that I hope that we had left behind in the late 2010s with Black Bear and Arizona Zervis. Even if I believe that Forrest Frank is trying to sound sincere, he just fails because he's got so little power or flair in his nasal vocal performance that you could swap in an embarrassing guest verse from a YouTube rapper and I wouldn't be surprised. For a lot of folks unfamiliar with Christian music but who like pop or trap or have any vestige of taste, this will be their worst hit song of 2025, and I would struggle to blame them. This is for the youth group whose parents won't even let them listen to NF or Lecrae, and the further it gets from popular consideration, the better. Let's move on. But number 2. But I do think some of you will be surprised that Forrest Frank is not getting the top spot for me, because if anyone bothered to care about objective markers, it would be a categorical failure in every dimension, except for two things. For one, I find the aesthetic repulsive, but I get why the whitest kid you know would not. Just because I don't hear the sincerity or what's moving about him doesn't mean that it couldn't do that. Even if you desperately want to introduce them to better Christian acts as soon as possible. Hey, that new Chance the Rapper album was good, why couldn't he chart? For another, truthfully, I could ignore Forrest Frank this year. He actually spoke out against AI and Christian music. He seems like he's got his heart in the right place, even if he makes dreadful music. And I can easily forget he exists. I could not forget the last two acts existed. And if there was a song that made me angrier this year,
I guess I'm the problem. And your miss never do no wrong. If I'm so awful, then why'd you stick around this long? And if it's the whiskey, then why you keep on pulling it off the shelf? You hate that when you look at me, you halfway see yourself. And it got me thinking, if I'm the problem, but you might be the reason.
I hate that Morgan Wallen called this song I'm the Problem, because it makes me sound like an obvious hack to say, well, he certainly lived up to his title. That the fake veneer of self-awareness was enough to excuse this sneering, pissing match by critics who thought it made us slightly interesting because they don't actually have to put in the effort to go any deeper. I hate that Morgan called his stream-trolling death march of an album I'm the Problem, named after this song, because he's also aware that ironic self-awareness, it's a convenient shield whenever he wants to count all the checks to replace Adam Levine, who sounds a little bit more real, because consumption, be it ironic or not, is consumption either way. Maroon Wallen, I guess we can call him that. Hell, just like last night, it's an alcohol-infused back and forth in a bad relationship that's exhausting to hear about and infuriating to experience at length, especially as Morgan Wallen has no real interest in any sort of self-reflection. He knows he's the self-destructive fuck-up who drinks way too much with regressive tendencies and bad politics, who hangs around bad people. I was legit shocked that Hardy didn't co-write this. Maybe he would have actually caught the non-rhyme that ends the hook that sounds so petulant and actually guts it of any power. If I'm the problem, then you might be the reason. It's not the comeback you think it is. What are you, 12? What's more obnoxious, somehow, is that it's got the feel of someone who is trying to goad a bad argument. Pick apart a song like I Knew You Were Trouble by Taylor Swift from way back in 2012, 2013. I still think that song is overproduced garbage, but I got the melodrama behind its arc. It took time, but I understand it. Whereas Wallen just seems as aware that none of this is good for everyone, but he's doing the exact same thing. The sex cannot be that good. The one halfway interesting line is that Morgan Wallen knows this girl sees a bit of herself whenever she goes back to him. You'd think he would also look in the mirror, but that would require a level of accountability that over 37 tracks, with more than a few on this list, Wallen has no desire to accept or change. This is dude bro mediocrity and inertia that doesn't even have the dignity to be fun, and it certainly is the problem. I already know the reason, but it's long overdue for, I don't know, a solution. And finally, number one. One of the things I've said about every year in making the worst list is the faster you get to the very top is disappointment. And the worst part of that is when I may or may not have stuck my neck out to defend you for art that I believe reflected flaws but still wound up working for me. So when you turn around and make one of the worst songs of your career, if not the worst, that fails because of many of the factors that worked for your art at your best, either complementing the subtext or amplifying its power, or just in spite of the factors, well, it stings all the more. I'm not going to say it fundamentally changed how I saw this person as an artist or as a person. I think I knew deep down they had the capacity to release this. I just thought they had better judgment. And again, I thought she got smarter or harder in the nick of time.
Good thing I like my friends canceled. I like them cooked in Gucci and in Scandal. Like my whiskey sour and poison thorny flowers. Welcome to my underworld where it gets quite dark.
you're still making songs about cancel culture in 2025, hell, if you're still talking about it at all, I'm not going to take you seriously. Especially not from a billionaire who decided to shelve her self-awareness, dignity, good sense, and taste for an album that might not be the worst of her career, but is certainly the least of her career. So, in the worst song from her least album, Taylor Swift tries to flex her acumen in dodging and surviving getting canceled, seemingly oblivious to the fact that A, the paparazzi/Kardashian-driven circumstances behind the last major attempts to undermine her career, they're not really in place for her in 2025 to stop her, and B, the only way you get successfully canceled for good in this time, it's by your own audience. They're the ones that have power. And if you spent multiple album cycles in a love-hate relationship to them while extracting exorbitant capital, even if I think your fame is more precarious now than ever, and I think you know that, I also don't think you're at serious risk here. That's not saying that the act of being publicly shunned or ostracized can't be for bad reasons, or it can't hurt you. It can, it's designed to. But I've been getting really sick of watching someone make the heel turn when they've got every resource at their disposal and they've won all the battles in front of them and still refuse to allow themselves to be happy. At least Reputation was made in the wake of that backlash. At least the Tortured Poets Department had the grandiosity and semi-righteous fervor and the tragic love affair. This has the sour, badly tuned guitars left over from a 90s gutter that don't remotely match the smoother, haunted knock of the beat, and Taylor Swift surrounding herself in breathy, whispery overdubs, trying to make this sound faux opulent and darkly glamorous when there's nothing about those who lionize getting canceled that look good. The bitter rot always seeps in. And there's so many bad lines in the song. Like my whiskey sour. Congrats on your underwhelming cocktail pun. Bring a tiny violin to a knife fight. Don't act like your pettiness deserves to be lionized or that you think it's interesting. Did you girl boss too close to the sun? Well, that one feels self-evident and so fucking dated. Did you write a draft for this song in 2017? But what's most revealing is the everybody has bodies in the attic or took somebody's man. First off, no, not everyone does some of that shit. But even if you think the rank hypocrisy coming from the self-righteous or envious people online is worth highlighting, you, of all people, should know when you have enough power, it doesn't fucking matter either way. So for a song like this, beyond being badly written dog shit that sounds like it was being written on a dare with production that can't manifest any sort of credible intensity and really sounds like a Reputation reject, it represents something that I think is truly gross. I don't think Taylor Swift's in her MAGA arc. She's been a centrist liberal way too long for that, even if her class interests align with fewer and fewer people there. But this sort of faux dark vice signaling, because that's what some will only believe is authentic, that's far more cancerous, and it exists on both sides. Be it the vindictive, Cersei-esque glee and power for its own sake, hypocrisy be damned, or those who use no ethical consumption under capitalism as a catch-all excuse to keep on consuming for a, well, nobody's perfect analog that allows you to be devoid of morals and principles too. It's a bipartisan Ouroboros of suck that has me desperately hope Taylor Swift takes a long break, really enjoys her wedding, and gets some fresh fucking material. She's not touring for this era, and the sooner we all forget it, and this song, and this year, the better. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Yeah, I know I got angry at the end, but yeah, this was one of those years. It happens. Beyond that though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you want to get involved in helping support the channel, get albums on my schedule, at least in the new year, maybe see some other year-end lists a little bit early, we'll have to see, or hell, just argue with me on my Discord, link to my Patreon and YouTube memberships is right over there. Don't feel obligated, tough times out there, there's a recession, I'm not doing any vinyl variants, but hey, options available. Till then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.